Sometimes life gives you exactly what you need when you've stopped hoping for anything at all. Derek Brenner, a struggling single father, thought he'd lost his chance at a fresh start years ago. When a lawyer called about an uncle's farmhouse inheritance, Derek expected nothing but trouble. The place was run down miles from nowhere, probably buried in debt. But his 12-year-old daughter Lizzie convinced him to at least look at it. What they found that morning changed everything. 200 animals, cows, horses, goats, chickens, dogs, all living on the property, healthy and calm, as if someone had been caring for them. But the uncle had been gone for weeks. Who was feeding them, and why did they all seem to be waiting? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The highway stretched out before them like a ribbon of worn grey fabric, cutting through fields that hadn't seen a good harvest in years. Derek Brenner gripped the steering wheel of his 15-year-old sedan, feeling every rattle and shake through his calloused hands. 3 hours into the middle of nowhere, chasing a dream that probably didn't exist. "Dad, look at that barn," Lizzie said from the passenger seat, pointing at a collapsed structure leaning against the wind. "Do you think Uncle Walter's place looks like that?" "Probably worse," Derek muttered, then caught himself. His daughter didn't need his pessimism, but we won't know until we see it, right? Lizzie smiled, that bright, hopeful expression that still surprised him after everything they'd been through. 12 years old, and she could still find reasons to be excited. The letter from the lawyer had arrived 2 weeks ago, forwarded 3 times before finding them at the motel where they'd been staying since the eviction. Walter Brenner had passed away, distant uncle, barely a memory from Derek's childhood, a quiet man who'd shaken his hand once at a family reunion and then disappeared back into whatever life he'd built for himself. Now that man had left him a farm. "Tell me again about meeting him," Lizzie said. She'd asked twice already during the drive, hungry for any scrap of family history. "I was maybe 10, Derek said, searching his memory. "My dad took me to some reunion. Uncle Walter was there, sitting on a porch, watching everyone else talk. I went over because he had a dog with him. Big shepherd mix, friendliest thing you ever saw. What was the dog's name? I don't remember. But Uncle Walter let me sit with them for an hour. He asked me questions. What I liked to do, what I wanted to be when I grew up." Derek's throat tightened at the memory. "I told him I wanted to fix things, build things, make broken stuff work again." "You're good at that," Lizzie said loyally. "Was good at that," Derek corrected. The factory had closed 8 months ago. Everything he'd built, the small apartment, the routine, the careful budget, had collapsed. The GPS announced their turn onto a county road that looked more like a suggestion than an actual street. Trees crowded close on both sides, branches forming a tunnel that blocked out the afternoon sun. They drove another 10 minutes before the trees opened up, and suddenly the world expanded into rolling fields, painted gold by late September light. Derek hit the brakes without meaning to. "Whoa," Lizzie breathed. The farmhouse sat at the end of a long driveway, a 2-story structure that had seen better decades, but still stood proud. White paint peeled from wooden siding, and the porch sagged on the left side, but the roof looked solid. But it wasn't the house that made Derek's heart stutter. It was the animals. They were everywhere. Cows grazing in distant pastures, horses standing by fence lines, heads turning to watch the approaching car. Goats scattered across hillsides, chickens pecking near the barn, dogs lounging in the shade of an oak tree. "Dad," Lizzie whispered. "Look at them all." Derek pulled up to the house and cut the engine. The silence that followed filled with sounds of life. Birdsong, soft lowing of cattle, rustle of wind through dry grass. A golden retriever approached cautiously, tail wagging low. Lizzie knelt down, extending her hand. The dog sniffed, then pressed against her with enthusiasm. "They're all so healthy," Derek said. He walked toward the nearest pasture, where 5 horses stood watching with calm, intelligent eyes. Their coats gleamed. Their hooves were trimmed and clean. These were animals being cared for. But by whom? The lawyer said Uncle Walter died 3 weeks ago. "Dad, come look." Lizzie had found the barn, a massive structure in surprisingly good repair. Inside were rows of organized supplies, feed bags stacked neatly, each labeled with handwritten instructions. Hay bales arranged in a loft, medical supplies lined up on shelves with pharmaceutical precision. Derek found the feeding schedule posted on a corkboard, Monday through Sunday, each day divided into morning and evening sections. Every animal group had its routine, portion sizes, special notes. It was the work of someone who cared deeply and thought systematically. Derek walked back outside, studying the property. Fences in good repair, water troughs clean and full. This wasn't an abandoned farm slowly dying. This was a living operation somehow maintaining itself. The key had been in the envelope from the lawyer. Derek unlocked the front door. Inside was clean, modest furniture in its place. A kitchen with dishes drying in the rack. Bookshelves lined with volumes on animal husbandry and veterinary care. And on the kitchen table a leather-bound journal lay open. Derek approached slowly. The handwriting was neat, precise. September 3rd. The new horse, Duchess, is settling in well. She was hours from slaughter when the call came through. But she's not worthless. None of them are. Derek turned back several pages. Entries going back months, years. Each one detailing another animal, another rescue, another life saved. He flipped forward to the most recent entries. His hand froze. August 15th. The doctor confirmed what I already knew. 6 months, maybe less. I've refused treatment. These months are better spent here. The animals will need someone who understands what this place really means. Derek turned the page. August 20th. I've been watching Derek from a distance. He lost his job. He's struggling. I remember the boy who wanted to fix broken things. Maybe he needs something broken to fix. The words blurred. Derek blinked hard. September 10th. I'm leaving the journal open on the table. If Derek comes, when he comes, he'll need to understand quickly. I trust he'll step up. That entry was dated 2 days before Walter died. Derek closed the journal carefully. This wasn't just an inheritance. This was a calling handed down from a man who'd seen something in a 10-year-old boy and held on to that faith for 30 years. Dad? Lizzie's voice was small. Can we stay? Just for tonight? Derek looked around the kitchen, looked out at the fields beyond. 200 animals depending on someone to care. He thought about the eviction notice, the job applications that went nowhere, the motel room with its flickering lights. Just for tonight, he said. Then we'll figure out what to do. But already, deep down, he knew. Lizzie hugged him hard. Outside, 200 voices waited in the gathering dusk. Derek picked up the journal and began to read from the beginning. By the time darkness fell, Derek had made his decision. He just didn't know it yet. Derek woke to the sound of his daughter's voice drifting through the open window. He sat up disoriented until he remembered where they were. Uncle Walter's farmhouse. Their farmhouse now, at least technically. The morning light slanted across unfamiliar walls, painted a soft cream color, warm and inviting, despite the strangeness. He found his shoes and made his way downstairs. Through the kitchen window, he could see Lizzie in the yard, surrounded by animals. A small herd of goats had gathered around her, their heads tilting as if listening to her chatter. She was smiling wider than he'd seen in months. Coffee. He needed coffee before he could process any of this. The kitchen was well stocked. Walter had left behind basics that hadn't expired. Derek started a pot and stood at the window, watching his daughter become a 12-year-old Snow White, with considerably less singing, but equal amounts of charm. The journal still sat on the table. He'd read until midnight, absorbing entry after entry. Walter had been meticulous. Every animal had a story. Every rescue had been documented, with the care of someone who believed these lives mattered enough to be remembered. "I'd better get out there," Derek muttered to himself. Whatever was feeding these animals, it wasn't magic. Walter had said the supplies would last through yesterday. Today was a new day. He found Lizzie in the barn, already examining the feeding schedule posted on the wall. "Morning rounds," she read aloud. "Horses first, then cattle, then goats and sheep. Chickens and smaller animals last." She looked at him with shining eyes. "It's like a recipe. Let's hope I can follow it," Derek said. The barn was a revelation in organization. Each section clearly labeled, feed bins marked with measurements. scoops hanging from hooks, each a different size for different purposes. Walter had built a system that anyone could follow, if they paid attention and cared enough to do it right. They sat together in the clearing for a long time, two people discovering that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead us exactly where we need to be. When they finally walked back to the farmhouse, Derek carried the map folded in his pocket and a new weight in his chest. Not the crushing burden he'd expected, but something different, something that felt almost like purpose. That evening, he opened the journal to the first blank page and picked up a pen. September 28th, my name is Derek Brenner. As of today, I'm the new keeper of Walter's sanctuary. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try. For the animals, for Walter, for Sarah, and for my daughter who deserves to see that good things can still happen in this world. Outside, 200 animals settled in for the night, unaware that their future had just been secured by a man who was learning that sometimes broken things fix themselves when given a purpose worth healing for. The next morning arrived with a goat emergency. Derek woke to Lizzie shaking his shoulder, her face pale. Dad, something's wrong with one of the goats. She's lying down and won't get up. He was out of bed and dressed in under a minute, following his daughter to the goat enclosure. A brown and white doe lay on her side, breathing rapidly, her eyes glazed with pain or fever. Derek couldn't tell which. What do we do? Lizzie asked, her voice tight with worry. Derek's mind raced. The journal. Walter had documented everything. He ran back to the house and flipped through pages frantically until he found a section on common health issues. Bloat, parasites, hoof rot. Nothing seemed to match exactly.
Call a vet, he muttered to himself.
But which vet? Where? Then he remembered Walter had mentioned veterinary care. Prepaid through March. There had to be contact information somewhere. He found it on a business card tacked to the corkboard in the barn. Dr. Leona Sterling, large animal veterinarian. The number was written in Walter's neat handwriting with a note. Comes Tuesdays and emergencies. Derek dialed. 3 rings, then a woman's voice, professional but warm. Dr. Sterling, my name is Derek Brenner. I inherited Walter Brenner's farm. I have a goat in distress, and I have no idea what I'm doing. A pause. You're Walter's nephew. He mentioned you might call. Describe the symptoms. Derek did his best, feeling inadequate with every word. Dr. Sterling listened patiently. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Keep her comfortable and watch her breathing. If it gets labored, call me back immediately. True to her word, she arrived in a dusty pickup truck exactly 40 minutes later. Dr. Sterling was in her late 40s, with silver-streaked dark hair, pulled back in a practical braid, and the calm competence of someone who'd seen every emergency imaginable. She examined the goat quickly, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. Pneumonia, early stage, treatable, but she needs antibiotics and rest. Derek watched as she administered medication and showed him how to monitor the goat's temperature and breathing. You'll need to check on her every few hours today, Dr. Sterling said. I'll leave medication and instructions. She should improve within 24 hours if we caught it in time. Thank you, Derek said, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. Dr. Sterling packed her supplies methodically, then turned to study him. Walter talked about you, said you'd been through some hardship. He knew more about me than I knew about him, apparently. That was Walter's way. He paid attention to people the same way he paid attention to animals, quietly, carefully, looking for signs others missed. She gestured around the property. This place is his life's work. Every animal here has a story. Every rescue was personal to him. I'm starting to understand that. Are you planning to continue what he started? Derek hesitated. I don't know if I can. I don't know anything about running a sanctuary. Walter didn't either when he started. He learned because he cared enough to try. Dr. Sterling handed him a folder. These are my standing arrangements with Walter. Weekly checkups, emergency visits, preventive care. He prepaid 6 months of service. That gives you time to figure things out. 6 months. Walter had thought of everything. Why would he prepay if he didn't know when he was going to die? Dr. Sterling's expression softened. He knew. Heart condition, diagnosed 2 years ago. He refused aggressive treatment. Wanted to spend his remaining time here, with them. She nodded toward the animals. Walter was a planner. Everything you're finding, the preparations, the arrangements, he spent his last year setting all of this in motion. Derek felt something crack in his chest. Walter had known he was dying and had spent his final months not fighting death, but ensuring life would continue after him. He believed you'd step up, Dr. Sterling continued. Said you were the kind of man who needed a purpose. Said these animals could give you what you couldn't find anywhere else. After she left, Derek stood in the barn, trying to process everything. The goat, whose tag identified her as Clover, was already looking more alert. Lizzie sat beside her, stroking her head and talking in soothing whispers. "Is she going to be okay?" Lizzie asked. "Dr. Sterling thinks so. We have to watch her closely." "I can do that," Lizzie said immediately. "I'll stay with her." Derek looked at his daughter, this fierce, compassionate girl who'd somehow kept her softness intact despite everything they'd been through. "You're a lot like her, you know," Derek said quietly. "Like who?" "Sarah, Walter's daughter. She loved animals the same way you do." Lizzie's eyes widened. "Really? Really? This whole place exists because of her. Because Walter wanted to honor how she saw the world." Later that afternoon, Derek began a systematic exploration of the property. The equipment shed held a working tractor, a utility vehicle, and various implements. The chicken coop had its own record-keeping system. Egg production tracked daily. Birds identified individually with leg bands. In the small office attached to the barn, Derek found filing cabinets full of records going back 20 years. Every animal rescue documented. Veterinary records filed by date and by animal. Expenses tracked monthly. And in the bottom drawer of the main desk, Derek found a metal lockbox secured with a combination lock. Taped to the top was an envelope. "When you're ready to understand." Derek opened the envelope. Inside was the combination and a note. The box contains letters. Each one is labeled for a specific moment. Open them when that moment comes. Trust the process. Ubu. Derek spun the combination and opened the box. Inside were a dozen sealed envelopes, each labeled with instructions. When you decide to stay, when you doubt yourself, when money runs short, when an animal dies, when you feel alone. Derek pulled out the envelope labeled, "When you decide to stay," and broke the seal. "Derek, if you're reading this, you've chosen to continue what I started. Here's what you need to know. This work will be harder than anything you've done before. But it will save you as much as you save them. Every animal you rescue will rescue something in you. I've made arrangements. Feed supplier paid through January. Veterinary care through March. That gives you 6 months to establish sustainable support. There's a community here that cares about this work. They'll reveal themselves in time. Don't be too proud to accept help. One more thing. There's a ledger in the office, leather-bound on the top shelf. It contains the name and story of every animal who's lived here. Read it when you're ready. Write in it when you understand. Welcome home, Derek. Walter." Derek found the ledger, a beautiful leather-bound book with thick pages. He opened it to the first entry, dated 20 years ago. Buttercup, April 12th. Dairy cow, 12 years old. Scheduled for slaughter because her milk production dropped. She has kind eyes and a gentle disposition. She deserves better than a brutal end. Page after page, year after year. Every animal named, every story told. Derek reached the most recent entries. The last one in Walter's handwriting. Duchess, September 15th, mare, 18 years old. Owner considered her worthless. I watched her run today. She's not worthless. None of them are. Below that, blank pages waited. Derek picked up a pen and wrote, Clover, September 29th. Sick this morning. Pneumonia. Dr. Sterling says she'll recover. Lizzie stayed with her all day. I think Walter would have liked that. Outside, the sun was setting. Lizzie had fallen asleep next to Clover, who was indeed looking better. Derek covered his daughter with a blanket and stood watching them. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Calvin, the hay delivery man. Just wanted to check, you staying or should I cancel future deliveries? Derek typed back, keep them coming. We're staying. The response came immediately. Good man. Walter believed in you. Derek looked around the barn. at the organized chaos of caring for 200 lives, at the systems Walter had built, at the legacy waiting to be continued. He didn't know if he could do this, but he knew he was going to try. For Walter, for Sarah, for Lizzie, for the 200 animals depending on him, and maybe, just maybe, for himself. They sat together in the clearing for a long time, two people discovering that sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that lead us exactly where we need to be. When they finally walked back to the farmhouse, Derek carried the map folded in his pocket and a new weight in his chest. Not the crushing burden he'd expected, but something different. Something that felt almost like purpose. That evening, he opened the journal to the first blank page and picked up a pen. September 28th, my name is Derek Brenner. As of today, I'm the new keeper of Walter's sanctuary. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try. For the animals, for Walter, for Sarah, and for my daughter, who deserves to see that good things can still happen in this world. Outside, 200 animals settled in for the night, unaware that their future had just been secured by a man who was learning that sometimes broken things fix themselves when given a purpose worth healing for. The next morning arrived with a goat emergency. Derek woke to Lizzie shaking his shoulder, her face pale. "Dad, something's wrong with one of the goats. She's lying down and won't get up." He was out of bed and dressed in under a minute, following his daughter to the goat enclosure. A brown and white doe lay on her side, breathing rapidly, her eyes glazed with pain or fever. Derek couldn't tell which. "What do we do?" Lizzie asked, her voice tight with worry. Derek's mind raced. The journal. Walter had documented everything. He ran back to the house and flipped through pages frantically until he found a section on common health issues. Bloat, parasites, hoof rot. Nothing seemed to match exactly. "Call a vet," he muttered to himself. But which vet? Where? Then he remembered. Walter had mentioned veterinary care. Prepaid through March. There had to be contact information somewhere. He found it on a business card tacked to the corkboard in the barn. Dr. Leona Sterling, large animal veterinarian. The number was written in Walter's neat handwriting with a note, "Comes Tuesdays and emergencies." Derek dialed. 3 rings, then a woman's voice, professional but warm. "Dr. Sterling, my name is Derek Brenner. I inherited Walter Brenner's farm. I have a goat in distress and I have no idea what I'm doing." A pause. "You're Walter's nephew. He mentioned you might call. Describe the symptoms." Derek did his best, feeling inadequate with every word. Dr. Sterling listened patiently. "I'll be there in 40 minutes. Keep her comfortable and watch her breathing. If it gets labored, call me back immediately." True to her word, she arrived in a dusty pickup truck exactly 40 minutes later. Dr. Sterling was in her late 40s, with silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, and the calm competence of someone who'd seen every emergency imaginable. She examined the goat quickly, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. "Pneumonia, early stage. Treatable, but she needs antibiotics and rest." Derek watched as she administered medication and showed him how to monitor the goat's temperature and breathing. "You'll need to check on her every few hours today," Dr. Sterling said. "I'll leave medication and instructions. She should improve within 24 hours if we caught it in time." "Thank you," Derek said, feeling the tension drain from his shoulders. Dr. Sterling packed her supplies methodically, then turned to study him. "Walter talked about you, said you'd been through some hardship. He knew more about me than I knew about him, apparently. That was Walter's way. He paid attention to people the same way he paid attention to animals, quietly, carefully, looking for signs others missed." She gestured around the property. "This place is his life's work. Every animal here has a story. Every rescue was personal to him. I'm starting to understand that. Are you planning to continue what he started?" Derek hesitated. "I don't know if I can. I don't know anything about running a sanctuary. Walter didn't either when he started. He learned because he cared enough to try." Dr. Sterling handed him a folder. "These are my standing arrangements with Walter. Weekly checkups, emergency visits, preventive care. He prepaid 6 months of service. That gives you time to figure things out." 6 months. Walter had thought of everything. Why would he prepay if he didn't know when he was going to die? Dr. Sterling's expression softened. He knew. Heart condition diagnosed 2 years ago. He refused aggressive treatment. Wanted to spend his remaining time here, with them. She nodded toward the animals. Walter was a planner. Everything you're finding, the preparations, the arrangements, he spent his last year setting all of this in motion. Derek felt something crack in his chest. Walter had known he was dying and had spent his final months not fighting death, but ensuring life would continue after him. He believed you'd step up, Dr. Sterling continued. Said you were the kind of man who needed a purpose. Said these animals could give you what you couldn't find anywhere else. After she left, Derek stood in the barn trying to process everything. The goat, whose tag identified her as Clover, was already looking more alert. Lizzie sat beside her, stroking her head and talking in soothing whispers. Is she going to be okay? Lizzie asked. Dr. Sterling thinks so. We have to watch her closely. I can do that, Lizzie said immediately. I'll stay with her. Derek looked at his daughter, this fierce, compassionate girl who'd somehow kept her softness intact despite everything they'd been through. You're a lot like her, you know, Derek said quietly. Like who? Sarah, Walter's daughter. She loved animals the same way you do. Lizzie's eyes widened. Really? Really? This whole place exists because of her. Because Walter wanted to honor how she saw the world. Later that afternoon, Derek began a systematic exploration of the property. The equipment shed held a working tractor, a utility vehicle, and various implements. The chicken coop had its own record-keeping system. Egg production tracked daily. Birds identified individually with leg bands. In the small office attached to the barn, Derek found filing cabinets full of records going back 20 years. Every animal rescue documented. Veterinary records filed by date and by animal. Expenses tracked monthly. And in the bottom drawer of the main desk, Derek found a metal lockbox secured with a combination lock. Taped to the top was an envelope. When you're ready to understand, Derek opened the envelope. Inside was the combination and a note. The box contains letters. Each one is labeled for a specific moment. Open them when that moment comes. Trust the process. It'd be you. Derek spun the combination and opened the box. Inside were a dozen sealed envelopes, each labeled with instructions. When you decide to stay, when you doubt yourself, when money runs short, when an animal dies, when you feel alone. Derek pulled out the envelope labeled, "When you decide to stay," and broke the seal. Derek, if you're reading this, you've chosen to continue what I started. Here's what you need to know. This work will be harder than anything you've done before, but it will save you as much as you save them. Every animal you rescue will rescue something in you. I've made arrangements. Feed supplier paid through January, veterinary care through March. That gives you 6 months to establish sustainable support. There's a community here that cares about this work. They'll reveal themselves in time. Don't be too proud to accept help. One more thing, there's a ledger in the office, leather-bound on the top shelf. It contains the name and story of every animal who's lived here. Read it when you're ready. Write in it when you understand. Welcome home, Derek. Walter. Derek found the ledger, a beautiful leather-bound book with thick pages. He opened it to the first entry, dated 20 years ago. Buttercup, April 12th. Dairy cow, 12 years old. Scheduled for slaughter because her milk production dropped. She has kind eyes and a gentle disposition. She deserves better than a brutal end. Page after page, year after year. Every animal named, every story told. Derek reached the most recent entries. The last one, in Walter's handwriting, Duchess, September 15th, mare 18 years old. Owner considered her worthless. I watched her run today. She's not worthless. None of them are. Below that, blank pages waited. Derek picked up a pen and wrote, Clover, September 29th, sick this morning, pneumonia. Dr. Sterling says she'll recover. Lizzie stayed with her all day. I think Walter would have liked that. Outside the sun was setting. Lizzie had fallen asleep next to Clover, who was indeed looking better. Derek covered his daughter with a blanket and stood watching them. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Calvin, the hay delivery man. Just wanted to check, you staying or should I cancel future deliveries? Derek typed back, keep them coming. "We're staying." The response came immediately. "Good man. Walter believed in you." Derek looked around the barn, at the organized chaos of caring for 200 lives, at the systems Walter had built, at the legacy waiting to be continued. He didn't know if he could do this, but he knew he was going to try. For Walter, for Sarah, for Lizzie, for the 200 animals depending on him, and maybe, just maybe, for himself. By the end of the first week, Derek had fallen into something resembling a routine. Wake at dawn, feed the horses, check on the cattle, tend to the goats and sheep, collect eggs, monitor Clover, who was recovering well. Repeat in the evening. Collapse into bed, exhausted. Lizzie thrived in ways Derek hadn't seen since before her mother left. She'd created her own schedule, drawn in careful colored pencil, mapping out her responsibilities: morning chicken duty, afternoon rabbit care, evening dog walks. She'd named every animal she encountered, keeping a journal with drawings and observations. "Dad, did you know that Butterscotch, that's the orange hen, always pecks 3 times before eating? And Chester, the spotted goat, only eats from the left side of his bowl?" Derek learned to recognize the enthusiasm in her voice, the joy that came from purposeful work. This place was healing her in ways he couldn't have engineered. But the practical reality gnawed at him constantly. $8,000, 6 months of prepaid arrangements. Then what? On the 8th day, Derek decided they needed supplies from town. The nearest settlement was Ridgemont, 15 miles away. A small community with the basics: a feed store, a general store, a gas station, and a diner. The feed store was called Riverside Supply, a weathered building that looked like it had been standing since the town's founding. Derek pushed through the door, a bell jingling overhead. An elderly woman looked up from behind the counter. She had silver hair braided and coiled on her head, sharp blue eyes and weathered skin. "Help you?" she asked. "I need some supplies," Derek started, pulling out his list. "Feed supplements, first aid materials, some tools." "You're at Walter Brenner's place," the woman interrupted. It wasn't a question. Derek paused. "How did you know?" "You have that look. Overwhelmed but determined. Same look Walter had 20 years ago when he started rescuing animals." She extended a weathered hand. "I'm Gladys, owned this store for 42 years. Walter was a good customer and a good man." "Derek Brenner, Walter's nephew." Gladys's expression softened. "He talked about you. Said you'd been through some hardship. Said hardship either breaks a man or shows what he's made of." She pulled out a ledger from under the counter. "Walter maintained an account here, prepaid with a $5,000 balance. Said whoever took over the sanctuary would need supplies to get started." Derek felt that now familiar tightness in his chest. $5,000. Another gift from a man who'd thought of everything. He really planned all this, Derek said quietly. Walter knew his time was short. Spent his last year making sure his animals would be cared for after he was gone. Gladys studied him carefully. "Question is, are you just passing through or are you staying?" "Staying," Derek said, surprised by the certainty in his voice. Gladys nodded approvingly. "Good. Those animals deserve stability. And I think you deserve what that place can give you." "What's that?" "Purpose, healing, community." She smiled. "Walter's sanctuary touched more lives than just the animals. He saved my grandson's therapy horse from being put down 5 years ago. Horse named Ranger. Maybe you've met him." Derek remembered. A sturdy bay gelding with a gentle temperament. "My grandson has autism," Gladys continued. "Doesn't talk much, but put him with Ranger and something opens up. That horse gave my family a gift we couldn't have gotten anywhere else." She pulled out a worn photo from her wallet. A young boy with his arms around Ranger's neck, both at peace. "That's the impact of what Walter built," Gladys said. "Not just saving animals, connecting them with people who need them." Derek felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier. This wasn't just about feeding animals. It was about maintaining connections Walter had carefully cultivated. "Welcome to the community," Gladys said. "We take care of our own here." On the drive back, Lizzie was quiet, looking out the window. "What are you thinking about?" Derek asked. "Mum," she said softly, "do you think she would have liked the farm?" Derek's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Lizzie's mother, Amanda, had left them 5 years ago, chasing something she couldn't name. She hadn't wanted the life they'd built, hadn't wanted the responsibility of motherhood. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said honestly. "Your mom was always looking for something she thought was missing. Maybe she just couldn't see what was right in front of her," Lizzie said with wisdom beyond her years. "Maybe. I'm glad we're here, Dad. I know it's hard, but I'm glad." Derek reached over and squeezed her hand. "Me too, kiddo." Back at the sanctuary, Derek found an envelope tucked into the doorframe. No postage, hand-delivered. He opened it to find a note. "Heard Walter's nephew is taking over. We'd like to help. Come to the Methodist Church Sunday at 2 p.m. Pastor Garrett." Sunday was 2 days away. Derek filed the note, curious about what help might look like. That evening his phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. "Mr. Brenner, this is Andrew Kowalski. I'm a retired teacher. Walter and I were friends. I heard you've taken over the sanctuary." "Word travels fast," Derek said. "Small community, good news spreads." Andrew's voice was warm, grandfatherly. "I wanted to offer my help. I used to come out on weekends to assist Walter with feeding and maintenance. I'd like to continue if you're amenable." "You want to volunteer?" Derek asked, surprised. "Walter's work mattered. I'd like to see it continue. And frankly, I need something to fill my retirement. Helping here gives me purpose." Purpose. That word again. Derek was beginning to understand that this sanctuary gave as much as it received. "I'd appreciate the help," Derek said. "More than you know." "Excellent. I'll come by Saturday morning. We can work out a schedule." After the call, Derek pulled out the envelope labeled, "When You Feel Alone," from Walter's box. He broke the seal and read, "Derek, you're not alone in this work. I built relationships over 20 years with people who believe in what we're doing here. They'll reach out. Let them help. This sanctuary survives because it's not one person's burden. It's a community's mission. Trust them, Walter." Derek smiled despite himself. Walter really had thought of everything. The next day brought another surprise. A woman in her 40s arrived driving a pickup truck loaded with compost. "I'm Beverly Chen," she said. "I run an organic farm about 10 miles east. Walter and I had an arrangement. My compost for his manure. Sustainable exchange." "That sounds practical," Derek said, still adjusting to people showing up with solutions. Walter understood systems. "Everything here serves multiple purposes." She gestured to the overgrown vegetable plots near the house. "Walter used to maintain quite a garden, supplemented feed costs with homegrown produce." "I don't know much about gardening," Derek admitted. "I do," Beverly said, "and I'd be happy to teach you. Walter and I had a good partnership. I'd like to continue it if you're interested." By the end of the week, Derek had a list of contacts, people Walter had touched, relationships he'd built, a network of support. Andrew would handle weekend feedings. Beverly would maintain the gardens. Gladys offered credit and advice. Dr. Sterling provided medical care. Calvin delivered hay. And Pastor Garrett had something planned for Sunday. Derek sat at the kitchen table Friday night, updating the ledger. Lizzie worked on homework across from him. "Dad," she said, "do you think Uncle Walter knew we needed this place as much as the animals needed us?" Derek set down his pen. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think he did." "How did he know? He barely knew us." Sometimes people see things in us that we can't see in ourselves," Derek said. "Uncle Walter saw potential. He saw that we were worth saving too." Lizzie smiled and returned to her homework. Derek opened the journal to a fresh page and wrote, "October 5th. 1 week in. The animals are healthy. Lizzie is thriving. The community is revealing itself. People Walter touched, support I didn't know existed. I'm starting to understand that this sanctuary isn't just about the animals. It's about creating connections, building purpose, remembering that we're all worth saving." Clover made a full recovery. "I think Walter would be pleased." He closed the journal and looked out at the darkened pastures. Somewhere out there, 200 animals slept peacefully. They were safe, fed, protected, and for the first time in Years. Derek felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. Sunday afternoon found Derek and Lizzie standing outside Ridgemont Methodist Church, a modest white building that had probably been standing for a century. Cars filled the small parking lot, more people than Derek had expected. Pastor Garrett met them at the door, a man in his 60s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. Derek Brenner. "Thank you for coming. And this must be Lizzie." "Hi," Lizzie said shyly. "We've gathered some folks who knew Walter and support what he was doing," Pastor Garrett said, leading them inside. "Thought it might help you understand the community around the sanctuary." The fellowship hall was filled with perhaps 40 people. Families, elderly couples, teenagers, children. They looked up as Derek entered, faces curious and welcoming. Pastor Garrett raised his hand for attention. "Friends, this is Derek Brenner, Walter's nephew, who's taken over the sanctuary. Derek, these are people whose lives Walter touched through his work." A woman in her 30s stood. "Walter saved my daughter's pony from being sold to a slaughterhouse. That pony taught my girl responsibility and kindness. We'll never forget what he did." An elderly man spoke next. "Walter took in my old farm dog when I had to move to assisted living. Couldn't bear to put her down. He gave her 2 good years before she passed naturally. That meant everything to me. One by one, people shared stories. Animals rescued. Connections made. Lives changed by Walter's quiet dedication. Derek felt overwhelmed by the depth of impact one man had created. Pastor Garrett stepped forward. "We'd like to support the sanctuary's continuation. Some of us can volunteer time. Others can donate supplies or funds. We want to help however we can." A sign-up sheet circulated. People committed to various tasks, feeding schedules, fence repairs, fundraising, administrative work. Within 20 minutes, Derek had a volunteer roster that would cover weekend operations and provide backup during emergencies. "Why?" Derek asked Pastor Garrett after the meeting. "Why does everyone care so much?" "Because Walter showed us something important," the pastor said. "He showed us that every life has value, that kindness matters, that one person can make a difference." He placed a hand on Derek's shoulder. "You're not just inheriting a property. You're inheriting a movement." On the drive home, Lizzie was animated. "Did you hear all those stories? Uncle Walter was like a hero." "Yeah," Derek said quietly. "He really was." The following week brought new rhythms. Andrew arrived Saturday mornings with coffee and stories about Walter. Beverly came Wednesdays to tend the gardens and teach Derek about sustainable farming. Volunteers rotated through on weekends, eager to help with whatever needed doing. But Tuesday brought something Derek wasn't prepared for. He was in the east pasture checking fence lines when he noticed Daisy, one of the oldest horses, 34 years according to her tag, standing apart from the others. Her head hung low, her breathing labored. Derek approached slowly. Daisy's eyes were clouded, her legs trembling. He'd seen enough by now to recognize the signs. Dr. Sterling arrived within the hour. Her examination was gentle but thorough. "Her organs are failing," she said quietly. "Advanced age. It's her time, Derek. Can we treat her? Buy her more time?" Dr. Sterling shook her head. "We could try aggressive interventions, but they'd only prolong suffering. She's lived a long, good life. The kindest thing now is to let her go peacefully." Derek's throat tightened. "How do we do that?" "I can administer medication. She'll drift off to sleep. No pain, no fear. Just peace." Dr. Sterling's voice was gentle. "This is part of sanctuary work, giving them dignity at the end." Derek found Lizzie in the barn. "Daisy is very sick. Dr. Sterling says it's time to let her go." Lizzie's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded. "Can I be with her?" "If you want to." They stood with Daisy in the afternoon sun, stroking her neck, speaking soft words. Dr. Sterling administered the medication, and within minutes, Daisy's breathing slowed, then stopped. Her body relaxed, the pain leaving her features. "She's gone," Dr. Sterling said quietly. Lizzie buried her face in Derek's shirt, sobbing. He held her, his own tears falling. Later, Derek found Daisy's entry in the ledger. Walter had rescued her 15 years ago from an auction house where she'd been bound for slaughter. Daisy, April 3rd, mare, 19 years old. Owner died, family wanted her gone. She deserves better than a brutal end. She'll live out her days here in peace, and she had. 15 years of peaceful days in green pastures. Derek and Lizzie buried Daisy under the oak trees, where Walter had created a small cemetery. Dozens of markers stood there, each bearing a name. Derek added Daisy's marker and planted wildflowers around it. "It hurts," Lizzie said, wiping her eyes. "Yeah, it does. But she had a good life here, didn't she?" "The best," Derek said. "Because of Uncle Walter. And now because of us." That evening, Derek opened the envelope labeled, "When an Animal Dies." "Derek, death is part of this work. It will hurt every time. That's how you know you're doing it right, when you care enough for it to matter. But remember, you gave them something precious. You gave them dignity. You gave them love. You gave them peace at the end. That's the greatest gift. Don't let grief overshadow the good you're doing. Every day they live well is a victory. Every gentle ending is an act of kindness. Keep going. They need you. Walter." Derek added an entry to the ledger. "Daisy, October 12th, passed peacefully at age 34. 15 years in the sanctuary. She knew kindness here. She knew peace. Walter saved her from a terrible end and gave her a beautiful life. Today we gave her a gentle goodbye. I understand now what this work really means." Outside, the sanctuary settled into evening. 199 animals now, one loss. But that loss was honored, remembered, grieved. Derek sat on the porch, feeling the weight of responsibility and purpose intertwined. This work would break his heart again and again, but it would also heal him in ways nothing else could. Lizzie sat beside him, leaning against his shoulder. They watched the sunset together, two people learning that love always includes loss, but that doesn't make it any less worth giving. 3 weeks into October, the sanctuary had become home in ways Derek hadn't anticipated. The morning routine felt natural now. He knew which horses needed supplements, which goats required extra attention, which chickens were the troublemakers. Lizzie had transformed from a grieving city kid into a confident young woman who could handle emergencies with calm competence. But money remained a constant worry. The $8,000 was half gone. The prepaid arrangements would expire in months. Derek lay awake, nights calculating expenses, searching for solutions. Then Pastor Garrett called with an idea. "We'd like to bring youth groups to the sanctuary. Educational visits. Teach kids about animal welfare, responsibility, compassion." Walter used to do this occasionally. The kids loved it. Derek hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready to teach anyone anything." "You know more than you think," Pastor Garrett said. "And frankly, it would help. Families might donate after seeing the work firsthand." The first group arrived on a Saturday, 8 teenagers from the church youth program. Derek felt awkward at first, but Lizzie took charge, leading the kids through feeding routines, explaining each animal's rescue story, demonstrating proper care techniques. Derek watched his daughter shine. She spoke with authority and compassion, holding the teens' attention completely. When she told Daisy's story, how they'd said goodbye just days before, several kids wiped away tears. By the end of the visit, 3 families had committed to monthly donations. One father, a carpenter, offered to repair the barn roof for free. "Your daughter is remarkable," Pastor Garrett told Derek. "She has Walter's gift, making people care." Andrew, the retired teacher, became a fixture on the property. He arrived every weekend with supplies and stayed for hours, working alongside Derek with the steady patience of someone who genuinely loved the work. "You're settling in well," Andrew observed one morning as they mucked out stalls together. "Still feels overwhelming sometimes," Derek admitted. Walter felt that way too, especially early on. "He told me once that he'd lie awake wondering if he'd made a terrible mistake." Andrew leaned on his shovel. "But he also said the work saved him. After Sarah died, he was drowning in grief. The animals gave him a reason to get up every morning. He never mentioned her in the journal," Derek said. "Not directly. Too painful, probably. But everything here is about her. Every animal saved is Sarah living on through Walter's hands." Andrew looked around the barn. "Now through yours." That evening, Derek discovered something unexpected. While organizing the office, he found a pair of reading glasses on the windowsill, Walter's glasses, positioned as if he'd just set them down moments ago. Derek picked them up, held them to the light. Through the lenses, the sanctuary looked slightly different, clearer, more defined. He set them back carefully, feeling Walter's presence in that small, ordinary object. Later, he opened the envelope labeled, "When Doubt Returns." Derek, doubt is wisdom asking if you're prepared. Fear is love protecting what matters. Both are natural. Both are signs you're taking this seriously. When doubt comes, remember, I chose you not because you're perfect, but because you're capable of growth. You have what matters most, the willingness to try, the capacity to care, and a daughter who reminds you why kindness matters. You're doing better than you think. Trust the process. Walter, the next morning, brought an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 40s stepped out of a county vehicle, carrying a clipboard. "Mr. Brenner, I'm Patricia Vance, County Animal Welfare Inspector. Routine inspection for sanctuary operations." Derek's stomach dropped. He'd been so focused on daily care that official regulations hadn't occurred to him. What if something wasn't up to code? What if they shut him down? "Of course," he managed. "Where would you like to start?" Patricia spent 3 hours examining every aspect of the operation. She checked animal housing, reviewed medical records, inspected feed storage, tested water quality, examined fencing and facilities. Derek and Lizzie followed anxiously, answering questions, providing documentation Walter had meticulously maintained. Finally, Patricia set down her clipboard and smiled. "Mr. Brenner, this is the best-maintained sanctuary I've inspected in 20 years. Everything exceeds standards. Animal welfare, record-keeping facilities, safety protocols." Derek felt his knees weaken with relief. "Walter Brenner mentored me early in my career," Patricia continued. "He taught me what animal welfare really means. When I heard his nephew had taken over, I was concerned. But you're maintaining his standards beautifully." She handed him an official certificate. "Your sanctuary license is renewed. Valid for 2 years. After she left, Derek sat on the porch steps, certificate in hand, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't name. Lizzie sat beside him. "We did it, Dad. We're really doing this." "Yeah," he said. "We really are." That night, Derek wrote in the ledger, October 25th, official inspection passed. Sanctuary certified for 2 years. Walter's systems work. His preparation was complete. "I'm beginning to understand that he didn't just leave me a property. He left me a blueprint for living. Every system he built, every relationship he cultivated, every preparation he made, all of it was teaching me how to care, how to commit, how to matter. 40 volunteers now, monthly donations growing, educational programs starting. This place is alive in ways that honor Walter and Sarah both. I'm starting to believe I can actually do this." He picked up Walter's glasses from where they sat on his desk now, a reminder of inherited vision. Through them, he could almost see what Walter had seen. Not just animals needing care, but a community finding purpose, a daughter finding confidence, a broken man finding his way home. Outside, 199 animals slept peacefully. Inside, Derek finally felt like he belonged. The discovery came on a cold November morning when Derek was searching for a missing halter in the oldest section of the barn. Duchess, the mare Walter had rescued in his final days, kept returning to the same spot near the back wall, pawing at the ground and snorting. "What is it, girl?" Derek asked, running his hand along the weathered boards. One board felt loose. Derek pulled, and it came away easily, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside was a small brass key attached to a leather cord and a tag with a date, 6 months before Walter died. The key didn't fit any lock Derek had encountered on the property. He searched systematically, trying every door, every cabinet, every storage box. Nothing. Then Lizzie noticed something. "Dad, look at the barn wall. There's a seam here that doesn't match." Behind a stack of hay bales that had been undisturbed for weeks. They found it, a door so perfectly camouflaged that Derek had walked past it dozens of times without seeing it. The brass key turned smoothly in the lock. The door opened into a small room, perhaps 10 feet square. A desk sat against one wall. Filing cabinets lined another. But what made Derek's breath catch was the third wall, covered entirely with newspaper clippings, photographs, and maps. "What is this place?" Lizzie whispered. Derek stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim light. The clippings dated back years. Articles about animal abuse cases, factory farm investigations, neglect prosecutions. Each one carefully preserved, annotated in Walter's handwriting. The maps showed surrounding counties, with locations marked in red ink. Some had notes. Investigated 2018, animals removed. Others, active concern, monitoring. Derek opened the first filing cabinet. Inside were folders, each labeled with a farm or facility name. He pulled one at random. Riverside Stables, 2019. Inside were photographs of malnourished horses, veterinary reports documenting abuse, witness statements, correspondence with animal welfare organizations. Walter was investigating these places, Derek said, understanding dawning. He wasn't just rescuing animals randomly. He was building cases. Lizzie opened another folder. Dad, look at this one. Hastings Ranch, active. The folder was thick with recent documentation. Surveillance photographs showed horses in poor condition, standing in mud with no shelter. Notes detailed feeding schedules that were inadequate, water troughs that were dry, injuries left untreated. The most recent entry was dated 1 week before Walter died. Situation deteriorating. 12 horses at risk. Owner politically connected. Local authorities won't act. Need to move soon. Animals suffering. Derek's hands trembled as he read through the evidence. This wasn't just observation. This was systematic investigation. Walter had been gathering proof, documenting abuse, preparing cases. A laptop sat on the desk, password protected. Derek tried several combinations before finding success with Sarah's birthday, a date he'd learned from her memorial. The computer contained years of files, encrypted emails to animal rescue networks across the region, photographs organized by location and date, spreadsheets tracking animals at risk, video footage of conditions at various facilities, and in the center of the screen, a folder labeled "Watch This First." Derek clicked. Walter appeared on screen, sitting at this very desk. The video was dated 1 week before his death. He looked thin, tired, but his eyes were clear and determined. If you're watching this, you found the room. That means you're ready for the full truth. Walter leaned forward. I've spent 20 years not just rescuing animals, but investigating abuse. Legal channels are too slow. Bureaucracy fails suffering creatures. Sometimes direct action is necessary to save lives. Derek felt his worldview shifting. The sanctuary you see is built on a foundation of covert operations, Walter continued. Some rescues were liberations, legally gray at best. I documented everything because I believed in transparency, even if I couldn't always operate in the open. Walter's expression grew more intense. Hastings Ranch is my final investigation. I'm out of time, Derek. My heart won't hold much longer. The evidence is complete. 12 horses in immediate danger. Owner Burton Hastings has connections to local officials. Inspections get mysteriously passed, despite clear violations. He paused, seeming to gather strength. I'm not asking you to break laws. I'm asking you to decide what justice means. The evidence could force action through media pressure, public outcry. Or it could stay hidden, and those horses will suffer until they die. Walter looked directly into the camera. I trust your judgment. You're a good man, a careful man. Make the choice that lets you sleep at night. But know this, every day of delay is another day of suffering for animals who can't save themselves. The video ended. Derek sat in stunned silence. Everything he'd believed about Walter, the gentle, law-abiding sanctuary keeper, had been one layer of a much more complex man. Walter had been an activist, an investigator, possibly even a vigilante, depending on how you defined the term. Dad? Lizzie's voice was small. What do we do? Derek looked at his daughter, 12 years old, standing in a secret room, learning that her hero uncle had operated in moral gray areas. I don't know, he admitted. He spent the next hour reviewing the Hastings Ranch evidence. The documentation was damning. Clear neglect, obvious suffering, animals in distress. Authorities had been notified multiple times. Nothing had changed. Derek found contact information for Walter's network, people with encrypted emails and anonymous handles. One name appeared frequently, Phoenix. They'd coordinated multiple rescues with Walter over the years. That evening, Derek couldn't eat, couldn't focus. The evidence folders sat on the kitchen table, a moral weight he didn't know how to carry. "Are we going to help those horses?" Lizzie asked at dinner. "It's complicated, sweetheart, but they're suffering. Uncle Walter said so. Uncle Walter also did things that might have been illegal. To save animals," Lizzie said. "To help creatures that couldn't help themselves." Derek looked at his daughter's face, earnest, convinced, seeing the world in clear terms of right and wrong. When had life become so complicated that saving suffering animals required moral calculus? He opened the envelope labeled, "When you face the hardest choice." "Derek, you've found the room. You know the truth. Here's what matters. I don't regret anything. Every animal I saved justified whatever laws I bent. But that was my choice, my risk, my conscience. You have to make your own choice. Just remember, silence is also a choice. Inaction has consequences. Those horses are suffering right now, this moment, while you decide. Whatever you choose, make sure it's something you can live with." "Walter." Derek looked out the window at his sanctuary, his safe, legal, carefully maintained operation. Then he thought about 12 horses standing in mud, hungry, untreated, suffering while a man with connections kept authorities at bay. What would Walter do? He knew the answer. But what would Derek Brenner do? That was the question that kept him awake all night, wrestling with inherited responsibility and personal conscience. Derek spent 3 days wrestling with the decision. He read through Walter's evidence again and again. Photographs of emaciated horses, veterinary assessments documenting neglect, correspondence showing authorities had been notified but failed to act. On the 4th day, he made a choice. Not Walter's choice, but his own. He would expose Hastings Ranch legally. No liberations, no gray areas. Just overwhelming public pressure through proper channels. Derek sent an encrypted email to Phoenix, Walter's nephew. "Need to discuss Hastings Ranch. Legal approach only." The response came within an hour. "Coffee shop on Route 47. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. I'll find you." The next afternoon, Derek sat nervously in a corner booth. A woman in her 50s approached. Practical clothes, weathered hands, shrewd eyes. "You're Derek. I'm Sophia. Phoenix was my network name." She sat across from him. "Walter talked about you. Said you'd finish what he started, but in your own way." "I'm not comfortable with illegal rescues," Derek said bluntly. "Neither am I anymore. Got arrested twice in my 20s. Learned there are smarter ways." She pulled out a tablet. "Walter's evidence on Hastings is solid. Question is how to use it." Derek outlined his plan. Document current conditions through legal means, contact investigative journalists, apply public pressure to force official action. Sophia listened, then nodded. "That could work. Hastings has been operating with impunity because everything happens quietly. Make it loud, make it public, authorities will have to respond. Can you help?" "I can. Walter saved 3 of my horses over the years. I owe him." She made notes. "We'll need witnesses, fresh documentation, media contacts. I know a reporter who covers animal welfare, Lawrence Chen at the State Journal. He's been trying to expose Hastings for 2 years, but lacked evidence." Over the next week, Derek assembled a team. Andrew volunteered to serve as witness. Pastor Garrett agreed to provide moral authority. Dr. Sterling offered to conduct official veterinary assessment if they could arrange access. Lawrence Chen, the journalist, was immediately interested. "If you can get me proof of current conditions and credible witnesses, I'll run the story." Front page. Derek created a plan. Hastings Ranch advertised horse sales, public events where potential buyers could tour the property. Derek would attend as an interested buyer, bringing Andrew as his horse expert consultant. They'd document everything legally from public access areas. Sophia would position herself off-property with telephoto lenses, photographing from public roads. Pastor Garrett would be nearby as backup. Lawrence would wait for evidence to publish immediately. The night before, Derek had a difficult conversation with Lizzie. "You can't come," he said. "It could be dangerous. But those horses need help, which is why I have to keep you safe. Dr. Sterling will stay here with you. If something goes wrong, if I don't come back—" "Don't talk like that," Lizzie said, tears in her eyes. Derek pulled her close. "I'm being careful. I'm doing this legally. But I need to know you're safe." He wrote a letter just in case, explaining everything to Lizzie. left it sealed with Dr. Sterling, told himself he was being overly cautious. That night, he read Walter's tactical notebook, the small, waterproof field journal that detailed rescue operation protocols. Walter had been meticulous about safety, about legal boundaries, about protecting everyone involved. Derek realized that Walter's operations had succeeded not through recklessness, but through careful planning. He'd minimized risk through preparation. Morning came cold and clear. The team met at a diner 20 miles from Hastings Ranch. Everyone clear on the plan? Derek asked. Andrew nodded. We're potential buyers. We ask questions, take notes, observe conditions. Nothing illegal. I'll be positioned on the county road, Sophia said. Public property, legal photography. Pastor Garrett squeezed Derek's shoulder. You're doing the right thing. The brave thing. They drove separately to Hastings Ranch. The property was large, remote, clearly neglected. Fencing in disrepair. Buildings sagging. The main house needed paint. Burton Hastings met them in the driveway. A heavy-set man in his 60s, with suspicious eyes and an aggressive demeanor. Hear about the horses? He asked. Considering purchase, Derek said, keeping his voice neutral. My friend here knows horses. Wanted his opinion. Hastings studied them both, then shrugged. Property's out back. Follow me. As they walked, Derek's hidden phone recorded audio. Andrew took mental notes. The conditions became worse with every step. Horses stood in muddy paddocks with no shelter. Feed troughs were empty. Water sources were stagnant. Several animals showed visible ribs, untreated wounds, overgrown hooves. Derek's anger built, but he maintained composure. These horses look thin. Are they on special diets? They're fine, Hastings said dismissively. Some people think horses need pampering. They're tough animals. Andrew examined one mare closely. This one has an infected hoof. When was she last seen by a vet? Don't need vets for every little thing, Hastings said, irritation creeping into his voice. Derek photographed several horses, claiming he wanted to show his daughter. Hastings allowed it. These were animals for sale, after all. Then Derek saw her, a chestnut mare, emaciated and listless, wearing a halter with a partially visible tag. He moved closer. The tag read Promise in Walter's handwriting. Derek's blood ran cold. This was one of Walter's rescued horses. Somehow she'd ended up back here, back in the suffering Walter had saved her from. Where did you get this mare? Derek asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Bought her at auction 6 months ago, Hastings said. Why, 6 months ago? Right when Walter died. Someone had sold Promise after Walter passed, and she'd ended up here. Derek's phone was still recording. She's in rough shape. What's your asking price? That one? 300. She's not worth much. I'd like to think about it, Derek said, every word carefully controlled. Hastings' expression shifted, suspicious, calculating. You ask a lot of questions for a buyer. Who did you say you were? Just a man looking for horses, Derek said. You're lying. Hastings pulled out his phone. I'm calling the sheriff. You're trespassing. We came as invited buyers, Andrew said firmly. Get off my property now. Derek and Andrew walked quickly back to their vehicle. Behind them, Hastings shouted into his phone. They drove away, hearts pounding, but with everything they needed. Photographs, audio recordings, witness testimony, and the devastating detail that one of Walter's own rescued horses had ended up back in this nightmare. Back at the diner, Derek uploaded everything to Lawrence Chen. The journalist reviewed the material, his expression growing darker. This is everything I need, Lawrence said. Story runs tomorrow. Front page. With this evidence, the county will have to act. Derek called Dr. Sterling. We're safe. Got what we needed. Is Lizzie okay? She's fine. Worried about you, but fine. That evening, Derek sat with his daughter and told her everything. About Promise. About the conditions. About tomorrow's article. Did we help them? Lizzie asked. We're about to, Derek said. Tomorrow everyone will know, and Hastings won't be able to hide any more. He opened Walter's journal to a fresh page and wrote, November 15th, found the secret room. Learned the full truth. Made my own choice, not Walter's way, but mine. Tomorrow we expose Hastings Ranch. Promise is there suffering. The horses Walter tried to save need saving again. This time we're doing it right. Legal, public, undeniable. I understand now why Walter did what he did. I just hope my way works too. Outside, the sanctuary was peaceful. Inside, Derek prepared for whatever tomorrow would bring. The article hit the front page of the State Journal at dawn. Derek's phone started ringing before he'd finished his first cup of coffee. "Neglect and abuse, local ranch under investigation," read the headline, with Lawrence Chen's byline. Below it, Derek's photographs showed undeniable truth: emaciated horses, filthy conditions, obvious suffering. The article was comprehensive and damning. Lawrence had detailed everything: Hastings's political connections, the repeated complaints that went nowhere, the documented neglect spanning years, witness testimony from credible sources. He'd been careful not to reveal Derek's identity directly, but the story left no room for doubt or denial. By 9 o'clock, Derek's phone showed missed calls from 3 television stations, county animal control, and various newspapers requesting follow-up interviews. He called Patricia Vance at Animal Control first, his stomach tight with anxiety. "Mr. Brenner, I need to speak with you about the Hastings Ranch article." Derek's heart sank. Had he somehow violated regulations? "I documented everything from public access points." "I made sure you misunderstand," Patricia interrupted, her voice warm. "I'm calling to thank you. We've been trying to build a case against Hastings for 3 years. Political pressure kept blocking us. Your evidence and this media attention finally give us the authority to act decisively. We're executing an emergency seizure order this afternoon." Derek exhaled slowly. "You are?" "Absolutely. The public outcry is too loud to ignore now. But I need to know. Can your sanctuary temporarily house 12 horses? They'll need rehabilitation, medical care, proper documentation." "Yes," Derek said without hesitation. "We can do that." "Excellent. Dr. Sterling can handle veterinary assessments?" "She's already on standby." "Perfect. Be ready for transport by 3 p.m. This is happening fast." The morning transformed into organized chaos. Derek mobilized every resource. Andrew arrived within 30 minutes, followed by Beverly, then a stream of volunteers responding to emergency calls. They cleared and prepared stalls, organized feeding stations, set up medical quarantine areas. Dr. Sterling arrived with her mobile clinic fully stocked. Lizzie worked alongside adults, her focus intense. "We're bringing them home," she kept saying. "We're bringing Walter's horses home." Pastor Garrett showed up with his church van. "Heard you might need help with transport." By noon, news vans surrounded Hastings Ranch. Derek watched live coverage on his phone. Burton Hastings stood on his porch, face red with rage, shouting at reporters and officials. "This is harassment. I know my rights. These animals are my property." Patricia Vance stood before the cameras, professional and unshakable. "Mr. Hastings, we have an emergency seizure order signed by Judge Peterson this morning. Your animals are being removed immediately for their welfare and safety. I want to see that warrant. I want my lawyer." "You're welcome to contact anyone you like," Patricia said calmly. "But these animals are leaving this property today." Derek, Andrew, and Sophia drove to Hastings Ranch together. The scene was surreal. Satellite trucks, county vehicles, sheriff's deputies maintaining order, reporters interviewing officials. Hastings was still shouting, but authorities were already moving horses toward waiting trailers. Derek spotted promise immediately. The mare Walter had saved, now skeletal and listless, stood trembling in a muddy paddock. Derek approached slowly, his heart breaking. "Hey there, girl," he said softly. "Remember Walter? I'm taking you back to his place. Back home?" Promise's ears flickered weakly. Some distant recognition, perhaps, or just exhaustion from suffering. Dr. Sterling examined each horse methodically as they were loaded. "Severe malnutrition, dehydration, multiple untreated infections. This mare here," she indicated Promise, "needs immediate intensive care." "She was one of Walter's rescues," Derek said, his voice tight. "Someone sold her after he died. She ended up back here." Dr. Sterling's jaw clenched. "Then we're bringing her back where she belongs. And this time she stays." The transport process took 3 hours. 12 horses, each one assessed, documented, and carefully loaded. Hastings attempted to block the driveway with his truck until deputies physically removed him and his vehicle. "You'll pay for this," Hastings screamed at Derek, his face twisted with rage. "I know you're behind this. I'll sue you for everything." Derek met his eyes steadily. "Those horses deserved better than what you gave them. Now they're getting it." By late afternoon, all 12 horses were settled at the sanctuary. Volunteers had worked tirelessly, filling water troughs, distributing specially formulated feed, preparing medical treatment areas. Promise was placed in the recovery stall, the same one where Clover had healed months before. Derek stayed with her while Dr. Sterling administered fluids, antibiotics, and pain medication. "Will she make it?" Derek asked quietly. "She's stronger than she looks. She survived Hastings. That tells me she's a fighter." Dr. Sterling checked Promise's vital signs again. "The next 48 hours are critical. But she's got a chance." Lizzie appeared in the doorway, her eyes red-rimmed. "Is that her? Is that Promise?" "Yeah, sweetheart. That's her." Lizzie knelt beside the mare, placing her small hand gently on Promise's neck. "We won't let you down again. Uncle Walter saved you once. Now we'll save you again. I promise." That evening, exhausted volunteers gathered in the barn. The mood was triumphant but somber, everyone understanding the gravity of what they'd accomplished. Pastor Garrett led a simple prayer, for these animals saved from suffering, for the courage to act when action was needed, for the community that cares enough to make a difference. Andrew clapped Derek on the shoulder. "Walter would be proud, son. You did this exactly right." "We did it right," Derek corrected. "Every single person here made this happen." Lawrence Chen arrived with his photographer. "Mind if we do a follow-up piece?" "The public wants to know these horses are safe," Derek nodded. "As long as the focus stays on the animals and on continuing Walter's work." The photographer captured scenes of volunteers caring for horses, of Lizzie sitting vigil beside Promise, of the sanctuary operating as Walter had designed it, a place of healing and hope. That night, Derek opened the ledger to a fresh page. November 16th, 12 horses rescued from Hastings Ranch through legal emergency seizure. Media exposure forced action where quiet complaints failed for years. Promise returned to sanctuary, Walter's own horse suffering again, now saved again. 211 animals now under our care. The sanctuary Walter built is fulfilling its purpose, saving lives, providing dignity, creating hope. I understand now what he meant about this work. It's not just about individual rescues. It's about building systems where suffering can't hide, where cruelty gets exposed, where justice ultimately prevails. We did this right. Legally, publicly, undeniably. And Promise is coming home. Outside, Promise rested in clean straw with fresh water and nutritious food within reach. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes, though weary, showed the first glimmer of something they hadn't held in months: hope. Derek sat beside her through the night, keeping vigil as Walter would have, because that's what sanctuary meant. Being present in the hardest moments, offering comfort when it mattered most, never giving up on a life worth saving. And slowly, hour by hour, Promise began her journey back from the edge. The follow-up article appeared 3 days later. Lawrence Chen's piece detailed not just the rescue, but Walter's 20-year legacy and Derek's continuation of that work. Photographs showed volunteers caring for horses, Lizzie sitting beside Promise, the sanctuary operating exactly as designed. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from across the state. The sanctuary's website crashed from traffic. Within a week, they'd received $15,000 in contributions, more than enough to cover the rescued horses' rehabilitation costs. Gladys called from the feed store. "Derek, people are coming in asking how they can help. I've got a list of 30 names already. Pastor Garrett organized an emergency fundraising dinner. We sold out 200 seats in 48 hours. The community wants to support this work. Local businesses step forward. A feed company donated 6 months of grain. A veterinary supply distributor offered wholesale pricing. A fencing contractor volunteered to repair all property boundaries, but the most significant call came from Caroline Webster at the State Animal Welfare Association. "Mr. Brenner, we'd like to feature your sanctuary as a model program. Your combination of rescue, rehabilitation, and community education represents exactly what we advocate for statewide." I'm just continuing Walter's work, Derek said, which is precisely why it matters. We have grant programs, technical assistance, networking opportunities. Would you be interested in becoming an accredited partner sanctuary? Accreditation meant legitimacy, funding, recognition. It meant Walter's life work would be honored officially. Yes, Derek said without hesitation. Promise's recovery became the sanctuary's focal point. Lizzie spent hours daily with the mayor, talking softly, brushing her coat, hand-feeding specially prepared meals. Dr. Sterling monitored her progress closely. She's responding beautifully, the veterinarian said during a checkup. Gaining weight steadily. Her blood work shows improvement. Most importantly, she's engaging with her environment again. Lizzie beamed. She remembers what kindness feels like. 6 weeks after the rescue, Promise was healthy enough to join the main herd. Derek and Lizzie walked her out together on a crisp December morning. They removed her halter at the pasture gate. Promise stood still for a moment, as if testing her freedom. Then she tossed her mane and cantered across the winter grass, strong and whole. "She made it," Lizzie whispered, tears streaming down her face. "She's really going to be okay." Derek pulled his daughter close. "Yeah, sweetheart." "She is." Burton Hastings faced 12 counts of animal cruelty, plus additional charges for making false statements to investigators. His preliminary hearing revealed the full scope of his operation: years of neglect, dozens of animals suffering, systematic evasion of regulations through political connections. Those connections couldn't save him now. The media attention had made his case too visible to ignore. His attorney sent Derek one threatening letter demanding compensation for seized property. Patricia Vance laughed when Derek showed it to her, completely baseless. The animals were legally seized under emergency welfare statutes. File it away and forget about it. Derek did exactly that. Hastings was finished, his cruelty exposed, his influence shattered. The sanctuary evolved rapidly. Andrew coordinated an expanded volunteer program with shifts covering 7 days a week. Beverly launched educational workshops on sustainable farming. Pastor Garrett brought youth groups monthly, each visit resulting in new donors and volunteers. By late December, the sanctuary had 75 regular volunteers, 200 monthly donors, and a waiting list of people wanting to help. Derek stood in the barn one evening, reviewing financial records. 4 months ago, he'd been counting pennies at a motel. Now he managed a thriving operation with sustainable funding and growing community support. "Dad?" Lizzie appeared in the doorway. "Can I ask you something?" "Always. Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Derek considered his answer carefully. Amanda had left because she couldn't handle responsibility, couldn't find meaning in commitment. Would she understand what they'd built? "I don't know if she'd understand this life," Derek said honestly. "But I know Uncle Walter would be proud. Dr. Sterling is proud. Pastor Garrett, Andrew, Beverly, all these people who've become like family, they're proud. And I'm proud of you." He knelt to meet her eyes. "Most importantly, I hope you're proud of yourself. Because you should be. You've helped save lives, Lizzie. At 12 years old, you're making a real difference in the world." Lizzie hugged him fiercely. "I'm proud of both of us." That night, Derek opened Walter's final envelope, the one labeled, "When you understand why." "Derek, if you're reading this, you've discovered what I knew you would. This work isn't really about animals or property or legacy. It's about becoming who you were meant to be. You came here broken, thinking you had nothing to offer. But broken things, properly mended, become strongest. You've built something that matters, not just for animals, but for everyone who participates. You've created community, purpose, meaning. You've shown Lizzie what love looks like in action. You've honored Sarah by continuing to see value in lives others dismiss. I knew you could do this. I saw it in that 10-year-old boy who wanted to fix broken things. You've fixed the most important thing, yourself. Welcome home. You've arrived exactly where you belong. Walter." Derek folded the letter carefully, feeling the weight of Walter's faith justified. Outside, 211 animals rested under his care. Inside, his daughter slept peacefully, secure and purposeful. He opened the ledger and wrote, "December 20th, 4 months since arrival. Everything has changed, Promise recovered fully. Walter's horse saved twice now. 12 rescued animals thriving. 75 volunteers active. State accreditation pending. Donations exceed operating costs. Community support overwhelming. But the real transformation is internal. I'm not the desperate man who arrived here lost. I'm someone who matters. Someone who makes differences. Someone finally home. Walter gave me more than property. He gave me purpose. He taught me that healing comes through service, that love multiplies when shared. The animals rescue us as much as we rescue them. I understand now. Finally, completely I understand. He closed the journal and placed Walter's reading glasses beside it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new animals needing help, new opportunities to serve. Derek looked out at the moonlit sanctuary, feeling profound gratitude, not just for the property or the animals or the community support, but for the chance to become someone worth being. Walter had seen that potential 30 years ago in a quiet boy at a family reunion, had held that faith through decades, had orchestrated everything to give Derek this opportunity, and Derek had risen to meet it. He smiled, thinking about tomorrow's youth group visit, the new volunteer orientation, the rescued horses gaining strength daily. This was home. This was purpose. This was exactly where he belonged, and that made all the difference. Spring came to the sanctuary with wildflowers and renewal. 6 months had passed since Derek and Lizzie first arrived at the farmhouse, uncertain and desperate. Now, on a mild March morning, Derek stood on the porch watching sunrise paint the pastures gold. The transformation was remarkable. What had once seemed impossible, caring for 200 animals, maintaining a property, building a community, had become simply life. Not easy life, but meaningful life. The kind that made him wake up each morning with purpose instead of dread. The morning routine had become second nature. He knew each animal by temperament and need, recognized their individual quirks and preferences. Duchess nickered her greeting when she saw him approach the fence. Chester the goat bleated his peculiar 3-note call that somehow sounded like a question. Butterscotch the chicken strutted around the coop with proprietary confidence, bossing the other hens with comedic authority. And Promise, beautiful, strong Promise, grazed peacefully in the east pasture, her coat gleaming copper in the early light, her eyes bright and clear. She'd gained back every lost pound and more. Her muscles had filled out. Her spirit had returned. She was whole in every way that mattered. Lizzie appeared beside him, already dressed for morning chores. At 13 now, she'd grown taller over the winter months, more confident in her movements. She carried herself with the quiet competence of someone who knew exactly what needed doing and how to do it well. "Ready?" she asked, pulling on her work gloves. "Always," Derek said, smiling at the ritual that had developed between them. They worked together in comfortable silence, the kind that comes from complete understanding. No words needed when you've worked side by side for 6 months, when you've shared the hardest moments and the best ones, when you've built something meaningful together from nothing but faith and effort. The volunteer schedule was full today, Andrew arriving at 9 with his usual coffee and cheerful stories. Beverly at 10 to work in the expanding gardens. A youth group at noon for their monthly educational visit. 2 new volunteer orientations in the afternoon for people eager to join the work. The sanctuary now housed 218 animals, 6 more rescues in the past 3 months alone. Each one came with its own story of neglect or abandonment, and each one found healing here. The volunteer program had expanded to 90 regular participants who covered every day of the week. Monthly donations from supporters across the state covered all operating costs, with surplus set aside for emergencies and future expansion. The State Animal Welfare Association had granted full accreditation in February, sending an official certificate that now hung in the barn office. Universities sent veterinary students for internships, eager to learn from a model program. Other sanctuaries across 3 states called regularly for guidance on replicating their approach. The combination of rescue, rehabilitation, community education, and sustainable funding that Walter had pioneered and Derek had refined. But the transformation Derek valued most was Lizzie's. She'd won first place in a statewide essay competition, writing about the sanctuary with passion and insight that brought tears to the judge's eyes. The prize included a $2,000 scholarship fund toward veterinary school, years away, but already planted firmly in her heart and mind. "I want to be like Dr. Sterling," she told him after winning. "I want to help animals my whole life. Not just here, but everywhere I can." Derek knew she would. She had Walter's gift, the ability to see value where others saw burden, to recognize potential where others saw only problems. After morning chores were complete and the animals settled, Derek visited Sarah's memorial, as had become his custom. He came several times a week now, finding peace in the quiet clearing where Walter had honored his daughter's memory. Wildflowers he'd planted last fall had returned faithfully, spreading across the ground in waves of purple and yellow. "We're doing well," he told Sarah, as he always did when he visited. "Your father built something extraordinary, something that matters. We're honoring it every single day, and I think we're making it even better. I hope that would make you both proud." He thought about Walter often, the complex man who'd appeared so simple on the surface, the quiet activist who'd operated in shadows to save lives, the grieving father who'd channeled his loss into purpose so profound it still resonated years after his death. Derek had found more of Walter's journals hidden throughout the house over the winter months, tucked in closets, stored in desk drawers, preserved in the attic. They detailed his early struggles when Sarah first died, and he didn't know how to go on. His doubts about whether one person could make any difference. His small victories that kept him moving forward when quitting would have been easier. Reading them, Derek understood that Walter hadn't been a saint or a superhero. He'd been a flawed, grieving, imperfect man who chose to care despite the difficulty, who showed up every day even when it was hard, who built something meaningful one animal at a time. Just like Derek was learning to be, just like anyone could be if they chose it. Back at the farmhouse, Derek sat at the kitchen table with a new leather-bound journal, identical to Walter's, purchased with ceremony from a bookstore 2 towns over. He titled it carefully on the first page, "For Those Who Come After." Below that, he wrote his opening message, "To whoever inherits this sanctuary when my time ends, you're probably overwhelmed right now, probably scared, probably wondering if you can possibly do this work. I was too. I was terrified. But here's what I learned over 6 months of trying and failing and trying again. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to care enough to try. The animals don't need someone flawless. They need someone present. Someone willing to show up every single day and do the work, even when it's hard, even when you're tired, even when you doubt yourself." This journal contains lessons I learned the hard way. Read them, learn from them, but also make your own choices. Honor what came before, but build what comes next. This place will save you as much as you save it. I promise you that. Welcome home. His phone rang, interrupting his writing. "Patricia Vance from Animal Control. Derek, we have a situation that needs your expertise. Elderly couple in the next county, wonderful people, farmers their whole lives, both facing serious health issues now. They can't physically care for their animals anymore, but they're heartbroken about it. 5 horses they've had for years, 8 goats, assorted chickens and ducks. The family wants to find somewhere the animals will be truly loved and cared for, not just warehoused. Your sanctuary came highly recommended."
"Can you help?"
Derek looked around the property through the kitchen window, at the well-maintained barns and pastures, at the systems running smoothly, at the volunteer vehicles already arriving in the driveway, at the resources and community support they'd built. 6 months ago, this question would have terrified him into paralysis. Now it just felt like Tuesday, like the work they were meant to do. "Send me the details," he said with confidence. "We'll make room. We always make room for animals that need us." That afternoon, the planning committee met at the sanctuary for their monthly session. They were organizing the 2nd annual fundraising dinner, having raised $20,000 last year. This year's ambitious goal was 35,000, enough to build a proper medical facility on the property with examination rooms, surgical capability, and overnight observation areas. Derek sat back and watched the committee work. Pastor Garrett leading with his gentle authority, Gladys contributing her business sense, Andrew managing logistics, Beverly handling publicity, and several others each playing crucial roles. They didn't need his input anymore. They ran themselves, passionate and organized and remarkably effective at what they did. "You've built something remarkable here," Pastor Garrett told him afterward as they walked the property together. "Walter planted the seed with his vision and dedication. You grew the tree through your commitment and hard work. Now it's bearing fruit that will feed this community for generations." Derek shook his head. "It's not just me. It's everyone. That's what makes it work. It's not one person carrying everything. It's a community sharing the load and the joy. That's wisdom," Pastor Garrett said. "Walter worked alone for too long. You've built something more sustainable by bringing people in." Evening brought Derek's favorite moment of each day, watching the sanctuary settle into twilight. Animals fed in content. Volunteers departed with smiles and stories, everything peaceful and right. Lizzie sat at the kitchen table doing homework, completely at ease, occasionally looking up to share something interesting she was learning. "Dad," she said, setting down her pencil, "I wrote something about Mom today. For English class, we had to write about someone who taught us an important lesson." Derek set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "What did you write?" "I wrote that she taught me something important by leaving, even though she didn't mean to teach it." Lizzie's eyes were clear and thoughtful, mature beyond her 13 years. "She taught me that running away from responsibility doesn't bring happiness, that the hard things are usually the things that matter most, that love means showing up, not just feeling something." She paused, then continued. "I'm not angry at her anymore. I was for a long time, but I'm not now. I'm just grateful we found this place. Grateful for Uncle Walter. Grateful for you. Grateful for the animals and the work and everything we've built." Derek felt his throat tighten with emotion. "That's very mature of you, sweetheart. Dr. Sterling says animals teach us emotional maturity if we pay attention to them," Lizzie said. "They live in the present. They forgive quickly. They don't hold grudges. Maybe I learned that from them." "Maybe you did," Derek agreed. "You're going to be an exceptional veterinarian someday." "I hope so," Lizzie said, smiling. "I want to help as many animals as I can, here and everywhere else." That night, after Lizzie had gone to bed, Derek sat alone in the quiet kitchen with both journals before him, Walter's original and his new one. He opened Walter's to the last pages, reading the final entries once more, feeling the weight of legacy and responsibility and love. Then he opened his new journal and wrote, "March 30th, 6 months complete since we arrived desperate and lost. 218 animals thriving under our care. Lizzie becoming exactly who she was meant to be, confident, compassionate, purposeful. Community support stronger than ever, 90 volunteers, sustainable funding, state accreditation, regional recognition. Walter's legacy not just secured, but actively expanding. But the greatest achievement isn't measurable in numbers or certificates. It's simpler and more profound than that. We're happy. Truly, deeply, peacefully happy. We have purpose that fills our days with meaning. We have home in every sense of that word, not just shelter, but belonging. We have each other, stronger together than we ever were apart. I came here 6 months ago broken and desperate, thinking I had nothing left to offer the world or my daughter. Walter saw what I couldn't see, that broken things, properly mended with time and care and purpose, become the strongest things. That loss can transform into legacy. That pain can become compassion. That one person caring deeply can change everything. I'm mended now. Not perfect, never perfect, but whole in ways that matter. Ready for whatever comes next. Ready to pass this forward someday to whoever comes after me. Thank you, Walter, for seeing potential in a 10-year-old boy at a family reunion. For holding that faith through 3 decades. For building something extraordinary and trusting me to continue it. For showing me that the broken boy who wanted to fix things could grow into a man who fixes what matters most. Hearts and lives and futures. You saved these animals, but you also saved us. That's your real legacy, not just the sanctuary, but the transformation it creates in everyone it touches. Rest well, old friend. We're honoring your work, and we won't let it end. Derek closed both journals and placed them side by side on the shelf, Walter's and his own, old and new, past and future, connected by purpose and love. Outside, Promise whinnied softly in her sleep, a sound of contentment. 218 voices in the darkness, each one safe, because someone cared enough to act. Because Walter had cared, because Derek had chosen to care, because a community had come together around that caring. Derek turned off the lights and climbed the stairs to bed, his body tired from honest work, his heart full with honest purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, it always did. New animals needing help, new problems requiring solutions, new opportunities to matter. But he was ready, more than ready. He was exactly where he belonged, doing exactly what he was meant to do. And that made all the difference.